our name, Oasis of Hope, has brought us a lot of toil and suffering through the years because we've been told that we are selling false hope because we deal with cancer. And in a cancer meet where I participated, providing our results or giving our results, an oncologist stood up and says, well, you know, this is all unethical because a big part of our treatment is emotional and spiritual support. And he says, all you're doing is selling false hope. So I asked him, are you selling true hope, telling the patient you have cancer, you're dead? Because that's actually what we are asked to do as oncologists. We have to lay it down as it is. You have cancer, you have 3 months. You have 6 months. If we give you chemotherapy, maybe a year. And the fact is that the patients actually buy that information as he just stated here. And so a patient is going to be saying, well, my doctor is an authority. I went 3 months ago to see him. He told me 3 months, today I'm going to die. And they drop dead because they can't let their doctors down, you know, their authorities. And so the mind is an extremely powerful tool that we are using exactly in the wrong way for our for our patients. Instead of using the power of the mind for their benefit, we are using the power of their minds for their detriment. I think this is a big part of a puzzle that we need to resolve in the cancer question, because we are not making many gains. So we have been integrating therapies in our hospital to try to resolve this problem. In America, in 1971, at the end in December, in the State of the Union address, President Nixon used 100 words to talk about cancer. And in part of that speech, he said, if the NCI is funded, we will find a cure in 10 years. And of course, you know, it's been almost 40 years and there's no cure to be waiting for, really. We have nothing on the horizon that will cure cancer in the near future. And the funds are there. I mean, if you look at the budget for cancer in 2007, I think in 2008 and 9 it went down a little bit because of the money problems that you're having here in America. But you get a lot of money for cancer here. $17.3 billion just in 2007 to research cancer. The NCI 5.9, the NIH almost $1 billion, the CDC 314 million, the Pentagon also puts a lot of money into it, the Veterans Hospital also a lot of money, the pharmaceutical industry $7.4 billion, 25% of their annual research and development spending is on cancer, and on top of that you get a lot of private donations. So that altogether, it sums to $17.3 billion annually in the States. It varies from year to year, and now because of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the NIH is probably going to double the sum of what they get per year. And what do we have to show for it? Well, very little. As far as new cases is concerned, every year more patients develop cancer. There was 1,437,000 in 2008, and in 2009, about 40,000 more people. And the risk of Americans getting cancer is one of the highest in the world. Almost 1 out of every 2 will develop cancer in their lifespan. 1 out of every 2 for sure in men, and 1 out of every 3 in women, in spite of all of the advances that we have. In 1977, there was a study done called Dietary Goals for the United States of America, and it was presented to the Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs. And the presenter said, the purpose of this report is to point out that the eating patterns of this century represents as critical a public concern as anyone before us, as Osama bin Laden or all of the mistresses of Tiger Woods. Without government and industry commitment to good nutrition, the American people will continue to eat themselves actually to death, not to poor health. And in spite of all of that information, very little changes from 77 to now have happened as far as what Americans are doing to reduce the risk of cancer. And that study came about, and then they said, well, it's not sufficient. So many other studies came about, I think, and you participated in one of the studies, Donna, and yet very little has happened. The latest one was in '89 from Everett Koop. And his 3 recommendations were very simple. Improvements in diet can reduce risk of chronic disease, obviously including cancer. Similar dietary recommendations apply to virtually all chronic diseases. And the most important in that one was to increase the amount of vegetables that you consume and reduce the fat intake. And I don't know if any one of you have ever read studies, but Block compiled the study of 200 studies talking about diet and cancer. Yeah, and he found a statistically significant protective effect for most cancers when people consume large amounts of vegetables and fruits. And he was talking about 5 portions a day. And a portion is what you fill up a cup with. So it's not a lot that you need to change in your lifestyle in order to reduce cancer risk by 50%. And in America, that would be a lot of savings for policy makers. So more studies came about. This is an interesting study from the China Project. And it shows that when you consume a lot of animal fat, you get a lot of cancer. This is a study on cancer of the prostate. In the USA, Canada, Australia, Belgium, where they consume about 150 grams of animal fat per day, they get about 130 to 150 cases per 100,000 population. Whereas in Germany, France, or Austria, where they consume around 100 grams, between 90 and 100, they also get less than 100 cases per 100,000 population. In Spain, Greece, or Romania, you see also that the trend is much lower. Or in Japan, Mexico, El Salvador, and China, this, because of lack of money, we don't have a lot of money to eat a lot of animal fat. And in Japan, because they choose not to, they have the lowest incidence of cancer of the prostate. And you can put cancer of the breast, you can put cancer of the colon, whatever cancer you want, except for lung. It's related to smoking a lot more. It's the same. So our way of life determines what's going to happen to us. It's just very simple. And the barometer now of our health is the size of our butts. These are the old seats of the Yankee Stadium that was built in 1922. And they have a restaurant in New York, and I went and sat in one of this. I was able to sit down. It was very difficult to get out. It was so small, 14 inches. They had to rebuild it in I think it was in the late 90s. Now they're 19 inches to accommodate us. Not only that it cost millions and millions of dollars, they lost 22,000 seats. So 22,000 less people can go to watch a ball game because of that. 34% of the U.S. adults are overweight, 31% are obese. That's 65% of Americans are above what they should be. It was 46% in the 80s. There are 4 million extremely obese adults now, 4 times more since '86. 112,000 deaths a year directly linked to obesity. Overweight people increase mortality for cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other diseases. Here you see a chart of how things are changing in America. In 1992, there was not one state where more than 55% of the population was overweight. By 1995, they had 4 or 5 states, and look, by 2004, just about every state, more than 55% of the population is overweight. And this directly correlates with the amount of fast food restaurants in the States. So it's very convenient for us to eat fast food, but it's not very healthy. A study done by Rutgers University on the value of boxed cereals was very interesting to me, because I found out that 95% of Americans wake up to boxed cereals. So they decided to do a study on the nutritional value of all of those cereals, and except for the ones that taste like sawdust, they found out that the box has more nutritional value than the content. Okay, so tomorrow morning, wake up, shred your box and eat it, and throw the contents away. Most kids are not going to like that. So one of the recommendations of all of these studies is that we don't have to change everything in our lifestyle. It's just increase the amount of vegetables and fruits that we normally eat. This study by Gro Harlem, or statement by the World Health Organization, said that the increasing burden of chronic disease is one of the leading health problems of our time, both the developed and increasingly in the underdeveloped world. At least 2.7 million deaths globally a year are attributed to low consumption of fruits and vegetables. And so in spite of all of this information, the amount of vegetables that Americans consume in the 90s to now, in 10 years, has not changed. In fact, it has dropped a little bit. Because Americans believe that, your French fries is the portion of vegetables that you need to consume per day. And so that's one of the reasons why the incidence of cancer is so high, in spite of the fact that, this information is coming out. This is from the Cancer Control Month sent by the President of the USA, and says that, a diet rich in fruits and vegetables is very good for you and helps to prevent many health problems. Half of all cancers are preventable if you consume all of that. Imagine the amount of money that you would save. And we can decrease the number of cancer deaths. That is, if you already have cancer and you change your diet, it will help you to live longer with cancer just by simply changing your diets and getting more exercise. So those are simple things that would save a tremendous amount of money. And so in view of all of this, I started looking into what is it that doctors know about nutrition. Especially when the father of medicine said, your food shall be your medicine and your medicine shall be your food. What do we know about nutrition? That's about it. If there's any clinicians here, look at your curriculum, what you learned about diet. Nothing. We are completely ignorant about what to tell our patients on that. And so, small wonder that the rates of disease and death by chronic ailments is rising through the roof, because we are not spending time in educating our patients. So the incidence is rising. What about the death toll? Cancer kills 1,500 Americans every day. And this is an interesting fact, from the Cancer Facts and Figures of 2008. I found this statement. Cancer mortality rates in the U.S. continues to decline, although the number of actual cancer-related deaths has gone up. What? I heard this saying many years ago, there's good lies, bad lies, and statistics. This explains it very well. What is it? What happened is that in 2003, for the first time ever, the death rate dropped by about 3%. And so they calculated that every year in America, the death rate from cancer was going to drop by 1%. Richard Shieldsky, right? The president of ASCO said, the number of cancer deaths has decreased for the first time in 70 years despite the growing and aging population. Survival rates for many of the most common cancers, including breast, colon, and prostate, are rising. This is true. The thing is, they're living about the same. We're just finding their cancers sooner. If you really study the numbers, that's what's happening. And the number of Americans living with cancers has increased, and I think this is a true advantage. So let's look at the numbers from the 30 to now, and this is how cancer has increased in men and in women. And so finally, in 2003, the number decreased, and it made all of the news that for the first time in 70 years, the numbers decreased. What was the decrease? Well, from 2002 to 2003, 778 men, less men died of cancer. But in women, it went up. So 409 women more died than the year before. And so the net decrease was 369 people less dying of cancer after billions and billions of dollars. And then, statisticians looked at the data more closely, and what they found, well, before I go into that, let's look at the numbers. This is where it dropped, but then the next year it went up. And it has been, fluctuating a little bit. So what that really means is that we as scientists have made very little impact on what has happened to cancer. And in fact, the death drop was not due to basic research, development of effective therapies. It was due to people decrease the amount of smoking, or the rate of smoking is the one that really decreased in the States. And the second one is that many doctors finally stopped using estrogen replacement therapy because it increased cancer of the breast. Those were the two main factors, and you can see the line of how men stopped smoking, and then the death rate of cancer of the lung started increasing, whereas unfortunately the fastest growing group of smokers is young women, because it keeps them slender. So again, our lifestyle plays a much bigger role than anything else. So 73% death toll rise since the war on cancer began, 150% faster than the US population growth, in spite of all of that money, in spite of it, research, treatment efforts, and soaring funding. We have very little to show for it. Cancer death rate in 2009, same as in 1970. In fact, it is the same as 1950. It has not changed. 2010, cancer is expected to be #1 cause of death, because it's going to overpass deaths of cardiovascular disease. It is now the #1 killer in children, in 30-something people, and of those ages 45 to 64. More deaths than the next 3 causes of heart disease, accidents, and strokes put together. It is a big problem that we need to look, and the death rate for heart diseases in 1950 for heart diseases was 586.8 per 100,000 population. For cerebrovascular diseases, 181 almost, and 192 almost for cancer. Look at the big change. By the 90s, the drop in heart disease is about 74%, about 80% here. In cancer, it stayed the same. And one of the reasons, in my view, for this is that cardiologists finally started talking about diet to their patients and about lifestyle. Whereas the message that we communicate to our cancer patients is, you're dead, do whatever you want. And so we need to change that. The 5-year survival rate in these 39 years has improved. In 1950, it was 50% in 71, and by 2003, it was 13% better. So we have more people with cancer living longer, but this change were dramatic increases in cures and longevity in very specific cancers. Hodgkin's disease, 80% curability, some leukemias for children that are curable, thyroid carcinoma, testicular carcinoma, and other childhood cancers. Outside of this, we have not made any big improvements, and all of those gains were very early when the cancer war began in the 70s. So we have not improved much since then. Dr. Shilsky continues to say, over the last 50 years, this nation has developed the world's premier or preeminent cancer clinical trial system. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, and Dr. Jonas was talking about it, and how do we evaluate results? And we're really working to evaluate results for our drugs to be approved, more than anything else. Not really for the benefit of the patient, but for them to be reimbursed. So between 1995 and 2012, new anti-cancer drugs were approved. You know, they scientifically, they were able to prove that they were better. And the first thing is that they compared against old treatments, which are not good, but at any rate. But in these 12 new anti-cancer drugs, there were no substantial advantages to the old ones, no improved survivability, no better quality of life, no added safety. And they only made the drugs a lot more costlier. Let me give you two examples, Avastin and Erbitux, that both of them are anti-angiogenetic drugs. They destroy the vessels that feed the tumor. And they were approved for cancer of the colon and the rectum. Avastin, combined with standard chemotherapy, improved survivability by a median 4.7 months without improving any quality of life. And it caused the, and another study on breast cancer failed to show any results. Erbitux, approved for third-line therapy, significant tumor reduction, no survival increase. So even though the tumors reduced in size, the patient still died at the same time than the patients that did not take the product. The biggest change is the money. $10,000 a month for this. Most insurance companies don't want to pay for it. Medicare does not pay for it. Maybe that's the reason why they live so short, because they have to pay so much money. And the other is almost as expensive. So this, wonderful clinical trial thing that you have here going in America is not providing you with the results that you wanted, that you actually expected. In these two trials, full compliance to the system, to what the FDA requires, years of research, thousands of patients, tons of data, huge expense, expected results, a handful of patients helped of the 57,000 people who will die of colorectal cancer each year, at a tremendous cost to everybody. Well, this Nobel Prize winner says, I just think this is a very tough set of problems. It is. And the system that we now have available is not resolving it. And that's why, to me, it was very refreshing to hear Dr. Jonas, because the mindset, the only way to change this is that we think differently, that we actually think out of the box. Because other problems in America have been resolved. The atomic bomb, it took 7 years and at a cost of $2 billion. NASA was established in '58, and 11 years later, two men were dancing on the moon at a cost of $20.4 billion. The human genome sequencing begins, and 15 years later, it was resolved at a cost of $3 billion. So very complicated problems have been resolved in a relatively short time, and with quite a bit of money, but not as much with cancer. The cancer war began in '71. Obviously, it began many years before, but officially it started in '71. 250 billion, millions of dead patients 39 years later, and we have really nothing to show for it. In fact, there's a number of studies, about 5 or 6 published, that show that patients with cancer that did nothing usually fare better than the ones that were treated. You will find a lot of data on PubMed. There's right now 1.5 million papers on cancer research. Yet, the benefit to the public, to the patients, is not there. So millions of mice have been cured. Who's looking out for us? And the biggest problem to me is that we have been wanting to convert medicine into an absolute science, and it isn't. As long as we continue to take care of the mechanical part of the patient and not his mind or his spirit, we are not going to make any gains. And these variables are just too difficult to control. And so that's what we need to change. Dr. Winikoff of the Rockefeller Foundation says there is a widespread and unfounded confidence in the ability of medical science to cure or mitigate the effects of chronic diseases once they occur. There is, in reality, very little that medical science can do. If you look at it, of the 1,500 diseases that we have names for, there's a handful that are curable. For instance, and the worst example is tuberculosis. We cure tuberculosis, and tuberculosis continues to be the #1 cause of death around the world. So not even the ones that we cure can we really control. So we need to change the way we look at things. Francisco Goya, that great Spanish painter, said that fantasy abandoned by reason produces monsters. But united to it, that is, fantasy united to reason, is the mother of all art. This is a Picasso. Cost about $14 million if you want to buy it. It's a monster. It's a fantasy abandoned by reason. And as long as we want to continue practicing medicine that it's abandoned by reason, too much fantasy or too much reason, we're not going to get places. We need to view medicine as it is. It is an art, because every one of us is different. I may have 2 patients, 47 years of age, cancer of the colon, both from Baltimore. Each one is going to respond differently. That is, and the art of medicine is me finding out that they're different. I cannot treat 2 persons the same, and that is why we need to change. And so, in my view, the reason for the failure in cancer is not a technical problem. In fact, it's not a money problem, as we saw. Many billions of dollars have been given to research cancer. It's not a lack of intelligence. Some of the most bright people in the world are involved in cancer research. It's not a lack of commitment. They are committed to finding a solution to cancer. The problem to me is philosophical. We need to change the way we look at this. John Johnson, an American philosopher, said men and women are limited not by their place of birth or their color of their skin, but by the size of their hope. Really what will change things is our attitude, our perception of things. As Dr. Jonas was talking about, perception makes a complete difference on things, you know. Here the public is looking at a very uneven fight. But this kid is just looking at a big target. If you remember the story of David and Goliath, you know, Goliath was used to practicing his slingshot with little cans. So when he saw Goliath, he said, "Man, this is easy." So it is our perception that changes things. And so there is a tremendous amount of hope out there, and there are things that we can do to make a difference for cancer patients. And so what we need to change is our philosophy, our approach on how we're going to attack the cancer puzzle. And so in our hospital, our whole philosophy is based upon two pillars. The first one is what Hippocrates said: first, do no harm, which especially in cancer therapy, we've forgotten. There's a publication in the Clinical Journal of Oncology about 10 years ago. They asked oncologists if they would treat patients with terminal cancer of the lung with multiple chemotherapy. 86% said yes. The next question was, if you yourself had cancer of the lung in terminal stages, would you give yourself multiple chemotherapy? They said no. You see, we're not bad patients, we just have inside information. So our therapies are extremely harmful. Chemotherapy is very harmful. It has terrible side effects. Radiation therapy. Surgery, thank God, is, you know, in the 70s, it was the epitome of surgery. I participated in a study where we did 8 hemicorporectomies to remove large tumors of the pelvis. The 8 patients died after about 6 months, free of cancer. They died because they couldn't cope being half the persons they used to be. And you know, mastectomies were actually removing 1/4 of the body of a woman. And thank God all those things, you know, are disappearing now, but that's the way we viewed, you know, we need to be very aggressive against cancer. It took more than 25 years from the time it was proven that a lumpectomy was as effective as a mastectomy for doctors to actually, in America, start doing lumpectomies. The second principle is that what Jesus said, love your patient as you love yourself. And so, you know, are you going to take, again, going back to that poll that was done on cancer specialists, would you do the same to your patient as you would do to yourself? Would you do it to your wife? Well, that would determine how well you're doing. Let's say your mother. Would you do the therapy to your mother? And so once you ask these two questions, you are going to be enabled to provide a much better therapy to your patient. So our whole philosophy is based on those two principles. And within those two principles, we are also going to see that the philosophy that is, in my view, giving such bad results is that we are going, right now, the philosophy is to destroy tumors, not keeping patients alive. That's a philosophy that needs to change. When we look for the tumor instead of the patient, the results are based on what happens to the tumor. we wanted to publish a paper that we did on cancer of the lung, where our results, and you will see them, are so much better than anybody else in the world. And we presented this paper, and it was approved to be presented in a World Congress of Cancer. Once they're approved and you present it, they have to be published. Because we were using alternative medicine, we were then recalled. They gave us a letter that it had to be peer-reviewed, and it was peer-reviewed at the Sloan Kettering. We came with all of our cases to the Sloan Kettering, and suddenly, 11 doctors come into the room and said, okay, let's look at the cases. And we put the first x-ray of a patient with terminal cancer of the lung, and then we put the next x-ray 5 years later, and the tumor had reduced by about 30%, but it was still there. And one of the doctors said, oh, look at this. He puts one x-ray with a large tumor of the lung, the next x-ray, nothing. And so my father asked, and what happened to the patient? Oh, the patient's dead. How long after, the x-ray was about 4 months apart? Oh, right after. Well, my patient is 5 years later, the tumor is 30% less, but it's still alive and enjoying life. Still, it doesn't work, goodbye. They left. Because you see, what they were measuring is what the drug does to the tumor. That's what's important right now. And so you will find a lot of reports of effectiveness because of what happens to the tumor. Even if the patients are dead, they go as a success. And another big problem with the philosophy of today is that we are involved in just studying primary tumors instead of metastases. Why? Because in primary tumors, there's very little or few variables. In metastases, you have hundreds and hundreds of variables, and it's very difficult to study them. So that in 1972, only 0.5% of the studies focused on metastases. And by 2004, 8,900 grants were awarded, and 92% of all of these studies didn't even mention the word metastases. What's the problem? That 90% of the money is going to study primary tumors, and only 10% to the study of metastases, but more than 90% of the patients with cancer die because of metastases. Very few patients will die because of primary tumors. See, we're going at it the wrong way. And that's a philosophical decision. Somebody has to make the decision. We have to go for this, even though there's so many variables. And so I like your presentation with a yellow line on the periphery. We have to change the way we look at research, especially in results on clinical trials, in order for us to go forward. So I rather have successful failures, that is, patients that continue with cancer and are alive, than failed successes, dead patients with no cancer. And so our expectation needs to change. That's one of the things the first thing that I tell our patients, right now as doctors and as patients, we have bought the idea that the only good result in cancer is to get rid of it. That's why the patient initially goes, you have cancer of the wrist, get rid of it. You have cancer of the leg, get rid of it. You have cancer of your head? Well, let's see what we can... The expectation right now is only to get rid of it. A very good expectation is, hey, live with it. Very little has changed. You see, before a patient is diagnosed with cancer, he was walking with cancer for years and years. A tumor of the colon, from the first cell to the size of just a pencil head, it's about 8 years. So they were walking with cancer for years and years and years. The only thing that changed is the information. And once the patient gets the information, it's devastating. Because the way we communicate, as I said at the beginning, is you're dead. You have cancer, you're dead. So a very valid expectation says, cancer is a very difficult disease. We probably will not get rid of it. But 20 years from now, you'll still be enjoying life. Why not? We have hundreds and hundreds of patients like that. We're told that we're going to die in 3, 6, 12 months. And 20 years later, they're still alive, enjoying life, and you take x-rays of them and they're riddled with cancer. Who cares? Because the thing that we have in our philosophy is, hey, let's make a good marriage between you and your cancer. What's a good marriage for all of those here, including me, that are married? What's a good marriage? You don't bother me, I don't bother you. And you have patients that will live for a very, very long time with good quality of life. All you have to do is change the expectation. So with that in mind, our philosophy is holistic. We are going to treat the whole patient, because the mind is a very powerful tool. And you are going to get emotional fortitude only when you have spiritual fortitude. And I think everybody accepts that we are tripartite, right? We are a body that has a mind and that it has a spirit. And as long as we forget about those two other entities as doctors, we're going to fail our patients. Especially a cancer patient has tremendous emotional and spiritual needs that need to be addressed. We are going to be eclectic. We're not alternative, we're not orthodox, whatever can help our patient, we are going to use, as long as it has scientific data behind it. So at the Oasis of Hope, with this philosophy, we've treated over 100,000 patients with state-of-the-art research that includes interventive, pharmaceutical, and nutraceutical medicine. We provide our patients with tremendous emotional and spiritual support, and because of this, we've improved the quality of life and survivability of our patients. That's our goal, that our patients live for an indefinite period of time with quality of life. And so what we are calling the new era of complementary therapies is the integratory or the integrative therapies. We're not complementing chemotherapy, we are integrating a number of therapies to help our patients where some alternatives are there. And basically all of these therapies are included in our protocol to help our patients. Half of them are working for the patient, and the other half are working against the tumor. So that, we have the spiritual support that I mentioned, the emotional support. Diet and exercise play a major role in how patients fare against cancer, in immune stimulation that includes everything. Let me just give you an example. It's been proven that white and blue are some of the most immune depressing colors. Most hospitals use those colors. So we use browns, greens, and mauves in our walls and stuff like that because it's been proven that they're more immune sufficient. We have laughter therapy with our patients. We have music therapy. We have prayer. We have many things that are going to work that are well-known immune stimulating factors. On the anti-tumor, we have the anti-tumor therapies, which, because we're eclectic, can be any one of them: chemotherapy, radiation therapy, or natural anti-tumor therapies. Most of the anti-tumor therapies are oxidant therapies. Chemotherapy, for instance, is an oxidative therapy. In order for you to have oxidation, you need oxygen. And it is a well-known fact, and I'll show this a little bit later, that tumors are hypoxic. So we need to precondition our patients to the oxidation in order for them to receive that oxidation better. So we do this preconditioning, then we use the therapy. Cell signaling transduction therapy is one of the newest things. It's not very new, but now we have a lot of science behind it through molecular biology that shows that nutrients can actually transpose the signaling system of cancer cells. Have you ever heard of Gleevec? Gleevec is this new anti-tumor drug that is not chemotherapy and has been very effective in some leukemias. Well, it works through cell signaling transduction. It does not allow the malignant cell to produce a protein that helps the tumor grow. And of course, you know, acid-base regulation for our patients is very, very important. So this is what we call integrative regulatory therapy at the Oasis of Hope Hospital. And for us, diet continues to play a major, major role, not just for prevention, but for the treatment of cancer. And the doctors have been really opposed to this, and I really don't understand why. When the first study came out in '77, the AMA actually wrote to Congress saying the evidence for assuming that benefits to be derived from the adoption of such universal goals, you know, dietary goals, as set forth in the report is not conclusive, and potential for harmful effects would occur through adoption of the proposed national goals. So, in fact, we doctors believe that a change in diet is actually bad for our patients. And from '77 to now, it has not changed very much. This is a very, well, in fact, they said that the association is not sufficient, that we have to prove that there is a cause between food and cancer, and so they wanted us to do a lot more studies. In spite of all of the information that we have now, Jonathan Waxman, a very renowned British oncologist in 2006 said, although there is now, finally he accepted there's a strong dietary basis to the development of cancer. Once cancer has been diagnosed, no change in diet will lead to any improvement in cancer outcomes. So we're still on the same mode as in 1977. But if you really think about it, you know, if bad foods can kill you, well, good foods can heal you. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to come to that conclusion. So food continues to be a very important treatment for our patients. And because Americans continue to be in that mode, you know, well, the surgery was a success, but the patient is dead, we have to come to grips that we need to change. Let me just go to the next one. I don't know if you knew this, but in the United States of America, every year 50,000 people die due to the diet that they receive while hospitalized. And you know, I went to Children's Hospital in San Francisco, and the restaurant is McDonald's. And I don't know how anybody can think that that can help cancer kids to eat that sort of food. So we need to change that. In the alternatives, where we are not using chemotherapy to help patients, we began with a protocol a few years ago using vitamin C as chemotherapy. If you remember Linus Pauling had some success with cancer patients in the 70s. And then famous Dr. Mortel from MD Anderson did a study, and they proved that vitamin C was actually good for nothing. And so the studies on vitamin C stopped at that time, but a Dr. Mark Levin, who is the head of research for the NIH, started reviewing all of the literature and found out that actually vitamin C is a very good anti-tumor agent. And he has published with a number of scientists some interesting studies. So we are using C as chemotherapy. vitamin C instead of chemotherapy, with very, very similar results based on the studies from Mark Levin and his group. One of the publications name or title is Reevaluation of Ascorbate in Cancer Treatment, Emerging Evidence, Open Minds, and Serendipity. If you want to read it, it's a great read. So ascorbate treatment of cancer should be re-examined by rigorous scientific scrutiny in the light of new evidence, said Mark Levin. And so he said, vitamin C in concentrations as low as 100 to 200 millimole are toxic to a number of malignant cells. But, he said, in concentrations approaching millimole, they can kill many cancer cells. And together with Qi Chen, he did a study with a number of cancer cells from mouse, and the more concentrated the vitamin C, the more cancer cells die. Then he did it in human cells, very similar results, the higher the dosage, and in normal human cells, no matter how high the dosage, you cannot kill one cell. Completely non-toxic. It's very specific, very cancer specific. And so the mode of action, which Linus Pauling, he was completely backwards in his thinking. Linus Pauling thought that because of the antioxidation of vitamin C, he would help cancer patients. But Qi Chen found out that it is the opposite. If you use vitamin C in very high dosages, it is an oxidant. And so vitamin C in the presence of oxygen produces peroxide, which is the killing agent. And so the accelerated peroxidant damage in the tumor, within the tumor, it cannot be repaired. Whereas the normal cells have many capacities to counteract H2O2. And so it is activating the apoptotic pathways of the malignant cell. That's the way it works. And so his conclusion was that only intravenous administration can achieve clinical toxicity to cancer cells. Mortel studies were all with oral and only 10 grams. They were able to find that in order for you to destroy cancer cells, you need at least 50 grams of vitamin C IV. And so we are following a protocol where we give 60 grams with very good results. But the problem is, in most cases, we need oxygen. And most tumors are hypoxic. And so this was known in the 30s by Otto Warburg, that tumors are hypoxic. And so one of the biggest problems is that how do we get oxygen within the tumor? And incredibly, the NCI invited researchers from all over the world in 1993 to resolve the problem of hypoxia. And it took many years, but in 2004, a Spanish group was able to confirm that with automato-transfusion, what is that? You take about 300 cc's of blood from a patient, you ozonate the blood, and then you give it back. That is what autohematotransfusion means. Ozone therapy improved oxygenation in the most hypoxic tumors. So now we have a method to increase the amount of oxygen within the tumor for oxidation actually to happen. This will help chemotherapy and radiation therapy as well, not only vitamin C. So this is a protocol that we've been following at the Oasis of Hope for many, many years, because the Germans and the Russians are all for ozone therapy, but the Americans have always said that it's quackery. So they paid for this study. I mean, you Americans paid for this study, and still, 6 years have passed, and nobody's using ozone in cancer. So the whole thing is that we need oxygen in the tumor to produce peroxide in order for this to work. Ozone provides that, but we have another element which is called Perfdect. This is a very interesting product. This is an artificial oxygen carrier. produced by a Russian company, and we were able to register it through our FDA in Mexico. It's a blood substitute. Americans have been working on blood substitute for many years, but since you don't need it, it is of no interest to you. Why? Because your culture of donation is incredible. I mean, you go out and give blood. In Mexico, we don't like to do that. The need in Mexico, for instance, for blood is about 2 million units per year. Only 1 million is donated. We don't like to donate our organs. It's just a cultural thing. We want to go to our boxes complete. So in Mexico, this was approved, and we're using it now on our cancer patients. And the importance of this, I'll go very fast with this, is that the cancers or tumors provide an environment where nitrous oxide is broomed away. And when you don't have nitrous oxide, you have constriction of arteries. And the arteries become so small that the red blood cell cannot go in. And that is the mechanical way by which tumors maintain themselves hypoxic. The beauty of this product is that the particle that transports the oxygen is 100 times smaller than the red blood cell. So we're going to be able to oxygenate the tumors, and on top of that, it has a very large surface area. Whereas 100 cc's of blood have 60 square meters of surface area to interchange gases, this perf deck has 847 square meters, 16 times larger. So we are making sure that we are oxygenating the tumors, and then when we have sufficient oxygen, vitamin C will work as chemotherapy within the tumor. Oops, what's happening? Pressing the wrong. So let's look at some results. This was our first patient into our protocol with using vitamin C as chemotherapy. Patient with cancer of the breast that came to our hospital on a stretcher, very large metastasis to the liver. The large metastases were compressing the bile ducts, and she was jaundiced. And when you have jaundice, you cannot give more chemotherapy. So this is one metastasis. You can see more there. We started the therapy in January of 2005. By July, you can see that there's a great improvement in the size of the tumors. I know that you're not radiologists, and it's hard for you to see, but there's a great improvement. She had bone metastases. When you have bone metastases, the bones get gray. White is the way that it should be. So you can see a great improvement of the recalcification of her vertebrae. She had lung metastases, which have greatly improved if you look at the size of this one or this one, just with vitamin C. And many of the tumors disappeared just in 6 months. The patient is now doing very, very well. The numbers, her count, the CA20 says a tumor marker that normally should be 38. When she came to us was about 1,000. By August, it was in the 100, 150 range. Still very high, but much, much better. This is another patient that came to us with cancer of the breast. This is a bone scan. This is a PET scan, and this is the combination of both of them, which most of us see this. Yes?
I'm sorry, just curious. Are there side effects to 60 grams of IV vitamin C?
Nothing. Zero. You couldn't take them orally, but IV, no side effects. So this is when she came. She had surgery, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, the works. By September, she came in May. You can see a tremendous improvement in the size of the tumor. And by October, she's completely free of tumor.
That was just the vitamin C, not the.
Vitamin C. Well, with the Perftec, in order to improve the oxygenation, okay? The Perftec has no anti-tumor effect. It only provides the oxygen for you to have the oxidation. This is another patient with squamous cell carcinoma of the lung. And you can see, you know, the tumor with the metastasis there, and it's completely gone from April to June. Oops, I'm putting the wrong number. They're wrong. This is another patient. No, that's the same patient with, you know, just a different view with a different metastases. That it's completely gone. Had a little bit of liquid, and now it's gone. This is a patient with a very large ovarian tumor. The patient looked like 12 months pregnant, and she called her tumor Bob. She wanted Bob to go away. And she had had all of the chemotherapy that you can imagine, and so we couldn't receive any more chemotherapy. So we started the vitamin C protocol in March. By June, you can see that the tumor had diminished significantly. So when she came, the tumor was above the navel, very close to the ribs. And by June, you know, the tumor was below just about the level of the kidney. So the tumor had gone down probably by half or more. And so we decided that it was time to do something else because the tumor was not reducing anymore. And so I talked to her, even though her tumor marker had diminished tremendously, she was doing so now very, very well. That we decided that Bob needed to come out. It was a very large tumor still, and weighed 11 pounds. Bob, but she's still alive now, cancer-free. We took biopsies of every other area. There was no more cancer, and so in this case we combined everything. And after the surgery, and it continues to be free of. I mean, the tumor marker is now within normal ranges. But when you're looking at cases, everybody says, well, those are anecdotal, and anybody can have a good result with anything, and that's true. So what happens if we put this to a more strenuous test? So what we decided to do is compare we have two protocols running. One, the IRT, everything that I said to you, using chemotherapy as the oxidant or the oxidating therapy, and the other one with vitamin C. Because we're a private entity, and you may give us later some ideas, Dr. Jonas, on how to do this, because nobody wants to publish this, because we are not doing the double-blind studies in our institution. We are a private institution, and so two things will happen. Either I cannot charge anybody, or I have to charge both. It's a private, we don't get any funds from anybody, so charging somebody to give them the placebo is not ethical. So what we do is that we compare our group to very similar groups in the literature, which is more or less accepted, meta-analysis. And so I'm going to be comparing the results of our therapy against conventional treatment that is published in the National Cancer Institute U.S. SEER Survival Monograph of 2007 for the same type of cancer in the same stage. So conventional therapy in cancer of the breast, advanced cancer of the breast, all of these are stage 4. The survivability of that cancer with conventional therapy at 1 year is 65%. That is 35% of the women die within the first year, no matter what you do. In our study, after 1 year, all of our patients are alive. The ones that came to us virgin to treatment, they came to us in stage 4, they were diagnosed, did not want to do conventional therapy, and came to us, and we convinced them that chemotherapy was the best thing for them. in conjunction with everything that we did. At 1 year, 100% of them were alive. At 2 years, 90% versus 44%. At 3 years, we're very close to our 4th year. I still don't have the data for 4 years. At 3 years, 75% versus 32%. With patients with cancer of the breast that had already, yes.
I'm sorry, do you know what the end is for conventional treatment?
What the what?
What the end for conventional?
Oh, this is a meta-analysis, so we're talking about a very large groups of patients. So these are patients that came to us that had been already treated. And so still 92% alive, 70 at 2 years, and 56 at 3 years. Statistical significance when you're doing it with a meta-analysis is very difficult. So it is statistically significant. We just didn't want to say it because if we get into numbers with statisticians, we would lose the argument. But now with cancer of the lung, these are very, very positive numbers. Most of them are, around 5% that are alive after 1 year. So we used the highest one that we found, which was 20% still alive after 1 year with stage 4 cancer. 76% of our patients are alive, and at 3 years, still 10 times more patients are alive with our protocol. With ovarian cancer, 94, 88, and 75 versus 62, 43, and 31. And colorectal cancer is not as significant as the other ones. We have 66 versus 43, and then at the end of 3 years, 27 versus 13. Still twice as many patients alive. Very good results. Then the second group that we started later with our vitamin C is using vitamin C as chemotherapy. These patients did not receive chemotherapy at our hospital. So in cancer of the breast, alive at 87% versus 100, and I'll show that to you. So we still have to fine tune this. We still are getting better results with chemotherapy than with vitamin C in breast cancer. In lung cancer, it's the other way around. We're getting probably better results with vitamin C instead of chemotherapy, as well as with colorectal cancer. But as you can see, the statistical analysis after this only 2 years is very significant. And our hope would be that in some cancers in the future, we will not need to use chemotherapy at all. So we need to work on that, and we need to work on how to prove it so that the authorities would look at this in a way that they would think differently.